guys, this is Anand and welcome you all to 23.5 degrees. In this session, we will discuss on the first chapter of class 11th physics, that is physical world. Before we proceed in this chapter, let me make two things very clear. Number one, you might not be familiar with few words that I will use during my explanation of this chapter, and that is understood because these topics, these terms were never been in your syllabus till class 10th. Okay, you will know about these things in detail when you actually come across them later in your subsequent chapters of class 11th and class 12th syllabus. Clear? Number two, do not expect a single question from this chapter in any of your exam, be it your plus 2 exam or entrance examinations like IIT JEE or NEET. Clear? If so, then why we are studying this chapter? We are studying this chapter because this chapter gives you an introduction of the whole world of physics. Okay, this chapter tells you what physics actually is, why you should study physics, why you should take an interest in studying physics, what are the things you are going to study in the next 2 years, right? And how we divide physics into various categories like optics, mechanics, quantum physics, electrostatics, electrodynamics. Okay, so these things you will know here. So before you actually fall in love with physics, it is very important for you to know the depth, the reach, and the very nature of physics. What physics is, knowing it is of extreme importance if you really want to fall in love with physics and keep this relationship throughout your life. Clear? The very chapter starts with the heading, I am referring to your NCERT textbook. What is physics? So what is physics? According to me, it is the most difficult question in the entire book because physics is very vast. Everything you can think of is a part of physics. Whether it is visible to you or not, it is a part of physics. Okay, I am able to write on the surface of this whiteboard because of the presence of friction between the tip of my marker and the surface of this whiteboard. Okay, I am able to make balance, I am able to stand and move here and there because of the presence of frictional force and gravitational force. Gravitational force helps me stick to the surface of Earth and frictional force helps me keep the balance, right? Everything that is happening is a part of physics. Many of those things are not visible to you. Why? Because they are either happening at a very far distance from you or at a very small scale, like those things that keeps happening all the time inside a nucleus or inside the atom, right? These things though are not visible to you, yet they are a part of physics and they keep happening all the time. Okay, if you are boiling water, the water gets uniformly heated with time. Why? Because the heat flows there with a mode we call convective heat transfer. We all know that heat can pass from one place to other in 3 modes. One is conduction, second is convection, third is radiation, right? So the first two, that is conduction and convection, requires a medium for the heat to propagate from one place to other. But the third one, that is radiation, does not require a medium, right? And it is due to this reason that the solar energy reaches us, because the entire distance in between the sun and the earth, that is roughly around 150 million kilometers. The distance keeps changing a little, but on an average the distance is 150 million kilometers. Sometimes during the rainfall or right after the rainfall is over, we observe a rainbow. Why? We know that at that time a lot of tiny water droplets are present in the atmosphere, or each of these droplets act as individual prisms, tiny individual prisms, right? And what these prisms do? First, dispersion of light rays and then total internal reflection of light rays. When I am switching on the light, what is happening there? The electrical energy is getting converted into light energy and what? Heat energy. Okay? So everything is a part of physics. Everything. When I lose my grip over this marker, it starts falling down. Why? Because physics is involved there. The law of gravitation. The earth is attracting everything towards its center. And the moment I loosen my grip, it starts falling down due to that force. For the same reason, the satellites keeps revolving around the earth. And why just satellites? The earth itself keeps revolving around the sun for the same reason, the force of gravitation. So physics is involved everywhere, be it the atom or the solar system. The planets are revolving around the sun, even at very large scale and as well as at very small scales that are not even visible to us. At all levels, physics is involved. Physics is the study of nature. Why the things happen around us in that particular way in which we see them happening. Why they normally does not happen in some other way, right? Many of the phenomenons happens in one place, in one direction. Sorry, many of the phenomena happens in one direction on their own. Okay, but to make the reverse possible, we need an external agent. Like for example, I kept birth, I kept growing older and older and older and older and older, and someday I will die. Right? This is happening on its own in one direction, but the reverse is not possible. Why the reverse is not happening? This is the study of these things is physics. We call it spontaneity. There are things that happen on their own. We call them spontaneous processes. Like water falls from an area of higher elevation to an area of lower elevation on its own. But to make the reverse possible, we need a pump, right? Which makes a pressure difference and forces water from a low pressure area to high pressure area. That means from a lower region to higher region. Okay? So the study of nature, how nature works, how nature governs these things, the countless phenomena that keeps happening around us, how nature governs them, what are the laws that governs them, that is physics. During our study of physics, we can move forward with two possible approaches. The first approach is the approach of unification. Okay, we can go forward and carry out our study with the approach of unification, or we can choose another approach, that is the approach of reductionism. So what is the basic difference between the approach of unification and the approach of reductionism? See, in unification, what we do is we give a common law, a common expression, a common statement, a common theory, explaining, that means giving reason for the happening or the occurrence of a whole lot of things, a whole lot of phenomena, a common reason. That means we are combining all those things with a single law, theory, or statement, or expression, whatever. Okay, that is the approach of unification. Not getting it? Let me give you an example. We all know about law of conservation of energy since our childhood. Again, we know about something we call law of gravitation, right? So this as well as this is, both of these are unification approach. Why? These things are giving a common statement, a common reason for the happening of a whole lot of things, for everything. Okay, like the law of conservation of energy, what it basically says, it tells you that you cannot produce energy, neither you can destroy. That's what it says. The energy of the universe is constant. It is never changing. If today it is say 100 joule, after 100 years it will be 100 joule. Okay, it is neither increasing with time nor decreasing with time. It is constant. What is changing is the form of energy. Energy keeps changing from one form to other. Like when I switch on the light, the electrical energy is getting converted into heat energy and light energy, right? So is it that the light energy is being manufactured, produced by the bulb? No. Is it that the heat energy is produced by the bulb? No. What the bulb is doing is converting electrical energy that is supplied to it to heat and light energy. It is not producing it independently, right? So the total energy in all the processes are constant. Energy is just changing from one form to other in all these processes. Okay. And you can apply this everywhere. Everywhere you can apply the law of conservation of energy. It is true. Whether you are applying it in thermodynamics, that is a branch of physics, we will come to it later. Whether you are applying it to thermodynamics, where we learn about the first law of thermodynamics says the same. Let me erase reductionism for a minute, for a few minutes. Okay. So, law of conservation of energy. In different branches of physics, you will learn the same thing, that is law of conservation of energy. Just a different statement to state the same thing. Just a different way to state the same thing, right? When you will study thermodynamics, you will encounter something called first law of thermodynamics. There are three laws of thermodynamics. The first law of thermodynamics states the same. states the same. Energy can neither be converted nor be destroyed. It can only be converted from one, energy can neither be created nor be destroyed. It can only be changed from one form to other. The first law of thermodynamics states the same. When you will study magnetism in class 12th, you will see the same thing in different words. Okay, that is Lenz's law. So Lenz's law you will study in magnetism in class 12th. Okay. Electricity and magnetism are attached with each other. They are connected to each other. Electricity produces magnetic field. Electricity can produce a magnetic field and vice versa. A changing magnetic field can induce current in a coil, in a conducting coil. That is, suppose you have a coil and you are moving a magnet near it, then the magnetic field associated with this magnet keeps changing, right? And due to that changing magnetic field, a current is induced in this coil, in this conducting coil. You will learn about these things later in class 12th. Okay. So Lenz's law gives the direction of the induced current, whether it is clockwise or anti-clockwise. This is what Lenz's law deals with. And the statement of Lenz's law is, actually Lenz's law indirectly states the same thing, law of conservation of energy. It is based on the same thing, law of conservation of energy. Similarly, when you will study electrodynamics, you will study something called Kirchhoff's law. Kirchhoff's law, which again states the same thing in a different way, suiting that particular branch of physics, that is electrodynamics. In different branch of physics, we state the same thing, that is energy is conserved as different laws in different way, right? So this is an approach of unification. You can apply it everywhere, in all branches of physics, everywhere, whether the things are happening at a very small scale, like those things happening inside a nucleus or in the atom, molecules, etc. Or the things are happening in a very large, like those celestial phenomena involving huge masses and huge distances like sun, moon, earth, right? You can apply it everywhere. So this law kind of unified everything. Similarly, if we talk about law of gravitation, first imagine the universe and take any two body in the universe. Okay, choose any two body in the universe. The size of these bodies does not matter. The distance between these two bodies does not matter. It may be huge, like the distance between sun and earth, 150 million kilometers, or it may be very small, like the distance between two protons or two neutrons, or between a proton and neutron inside a nucleus, because the size of the nucleus is of the order of 10 raised to the power 5 minus 15 meter. And in this very small size, okay, the neutrons and protons lies. So you can imagine the distance between neutrons and protons. You can apply this law of gravitation everywhere. And what this law tells you, that two bodies always gonna attract each other with a force given by the expression F is equals to G m1 m2 upon r square, right? Where m1 and m2, where m1 and m2 are the masses of the objects under consideration. It may be proton and neutron, or proton, such a small, or maybe the masses of, if we are considering two protons, then m1 will be the mass of proton, first proton, and m2 will be the mass of second proton. If we are considering sun and earth, then m1 will be the mass of sun and m2 will be the mass of earth. See the difference of scale. Still, this law is valid, that the two bodies under consideration are going to attract each other with this force. Okay, of course, as the distance between them increases, the value of this force will reduce, right? As the masses of the object increases, this force will increase. Now, to understand the approach of reductionism, let us take an example. Suppose I ask you how a DC motor works. Of course, this is not as simple a question as it seems to be, right? Why? Because a DC motor consists of so many parts, components, like the armature, rotor, stator, field magnets, rings, etc., right? So all these components has some function, and these together ensure the proper functioning of the motor. So to understand how a DC motor works, you have to understand the working of each of its individual components, right? This is what we call the approach of this is what we call the approach of reductionism. To understand the working of a larger or a more complex system, what we did is that we divided it into smaller parts, smaller components of which it is made up of. And then we studied the working of each of those individual parts. So now we can answer how the system as a whole works. Clear? The most beautiful thing, according to me, of reductionism is that once you understand the working of these individual components of a larger or a more complex system, you can use your knowledge to improve the working of the system or the machine you are studying as a whole, improve its efficiency, or you can even use these components to construct a different machine, right, serving the same purpose or some other purpose. Clear? So this is the approach of reductionism, and it is, you can say, opposite of the approach of unification. In unification, we unify things, right? We give a common theory, law, expression, etc. for a whole lot of things, explaining a whole lot of phenomena. We give a common law, right? And here, to understand the working of a more complex system or a larger system, we divide it into several smaller parts. Let's move on to other topic. Moving further, let us now study the fundamental forces in nature. Actually, it is 3 a.m. now. I have to sleep also. Let us study the fundamental forces in nature. There are 4 fundamental forces in nature. First comes, starting from the weakest of these 4. The weakest one is gravitational force. Then comes the weak nuclear force. Then comes the electromagnetic force. And finally, the strongest force that we know, that is strong nuclear force. See, in the next 2 years, you are going to hear about so many forces, like the force of friction. Okay, you all know about the frictional force, the force of tension that will be encountered while dealing with strings and springs in mechanics, mostly in mechanics. Then the force of surface tension that acts at the surfaces of liquids, and it is due to this force that the surface of a liquid acts like a stretched membrane. Clear? And lots of other forces too. But all these forces will fall under one of these 4 fundamental force categories. Starting with the gravitational force, it is the weakest force that we know. Number 2, it is long-ranged force. It is long-ranged force. That means it can act at infinite distance. Even the 2 bodies under consideration are separated by infinite distance, a very large distance. Still, this force will act. And the expression for this force, we all know about it. F is equals to G m1 m2 upon r square. So even the distance is very, very large. Still, there is a number we can write here, right? Even the distance is very, very small. Still, there is a number we can write here. So this force is always gonna exist. One important thing about gravitational force is that it is independent of the charges carried by the object under consideration. See, mass comes only in one variety. Mass is mass. It is not positive or negative. So this force is always attractive in nature. Gravitational force is always attractive in nature. It is long ranged. Okay. It is independent of the mass, right? The next force is weak nuclear force. It is very short ranged force. Its range is about 10 raised to the power minus 16 meter. That is, this force only, the weak nuclear force can be observed only inside a nucleus, and a nucleus is very, very small. about more than 10,000 times smaller than the atom itself. And atom itself is so small, right? You can imagine the size of a nucleus. And one more point about weak nuclear force is that it is observed only during beta decay process. See, you will learn about alpha decay, beta decay, and gamma decay in radioactivity when you will be learning nuclear physics in class 12th. Okay. Weak nuclear force are very short range. The range, that means the distance at which they can act, the maximum distance at which they can act, right, is of the order of 10 raised to the power minus 16 meter. This distance is roughly 1 meter. You can imagine 10 raised to the power minus 16 meter, how small it would be. Clear? Then comes electromagnetic force. The expression for electromagnetic force is F is equals to K Q1 Q2 upon R square. Somewhat similar to the expression for gravitational force, but the difference is that it was mass there and a different constant there. And in case of electromagnetic force, since it depends upon the charges and the nature of charges, it is charges replacing the mass, right? And another constant K replacing G in case of gravitational force. Electromagnetic force, we know that positive repulsion occurs, positive negative, what? Attraction occurs, negative again repulsion occurs. So same natured charges repulse each other and opposite natured charges attract each other, right? Electromagnetic force depends on charge. This is again long range force. This is again long range force, right? That means it can also act at infinite distance. It is not short ranged in nature as weak nuclear force was. Then comes strong nuclear force. It is the strongest force that we know. And it again, see, both the weak nuclear force and strong nuclear force are observed only inside the nucleus. Okay. So the strong nuclear force exists between neutrons and neutrons, between a neutron and a proton, and a proton and a proton. Okay. Strong nuclear force does not depend upon charge, and it is always attractive in nature. It is always attractive in nature, and it does not depend upon charge, right? It is the strongest force that we know. And it is due to strong nuclear force that everything around us and we ourselves are not bursting, right? Because everything is made up of tiny atoms. And why an atom is stable? Because of this strong nuclear force. If you consider the structure of an atom, it consists of various orbits in which electrons revolve, right? And there is a nucleus, a very tiny nucleus at the center. Here the neutrons and the protons lies. There are few neutrons and few protons in every atom, in the nucleus of every atom. Okay, so since neutrons are chargeless, okay, so suppose that strong nuclear force does not exist, okay, then electromagnetic force will cause the atom to burst, right? The nucleus to burst. Why? Because only protons are existing inside the nucleus, and protons carry positive charge. Since all protons carry positive charge, that means they are of same nature, so a repulsion will occur, and that will cause the bursting of the nucleus. So there is another force that is much stronger than electromagnetic force, and that too exists inside the nucleus. But unlike the electromagnetic force that is causing repulsion between two protons, every pair of protons, this force, that is a strong nuclear force, this too exists inside the nucleus, and it is very strong compared to the electromagnetic force. So this force overall dominates. And since it is attractive in nature, so all the protons and neutrons are combined together as a lump inside the nucleus, and things are not bursting. If you compare the strength of these forces, you can say if gravitational force is 1, weak nuclear force is 100 times stronger than gravitational force. And electromagnetic force is 10 raised to the power 13 times stronger than gravitational force. And of course, 10 raised to the power 11 times stronger than the weak nuclear force. And finally, the strong nuclear force is 10 raised to the power 38 times stronger than the gravitational force. So see the difference between the strength of electromagnetic force and the strong nuclear force. It is 10 raised to the power 25 times stronger than the electromagnetic force, and that is why it dominates. And due to this domination, the nucleus of an atom does not burst into pieces, right? Because if this force were not existing inside the nucleus, then everything would have bursted, including us.